Hey, what's up guys, this is Larry B. I'm done benchmarking the GTX 1060 6GB and the Ryzen 3 2200G $500 budget build. The point of this video is to show what kind of performance you can expect by upgrading from the Ryzen 3 2200G's integrated graphics to a dedicated GPU. Before we start, let's take a look at the system specs. For the GPU, we've got a Zotac GTX 1060 6GB AMP Edition. This GPU features 6 gigs of video RAM with a base clock of 1556 MHz and a boost clock of 1771 MHz. This is a dual fan model and requires a single 6-pin PCIe connector. For the system, I'll be using a Ryzen 3 2200G with 16 gigs of system RAM. For specifics, I suggest checking out my video, Ryzen 3 2200G build $500. For the benchmarks, I use in-game results. I do not rely on built-in benchmarks. I'd like to know what your feelings are on using in-game results over built-in benchmarks. Do you think I should continue benchmarking like this in the future, or should I change over to built-in benchmarks? Leave your thoughts below. Check the description below for Amazon affiliate links to hardware used and games tested. Let's take a look at the benchmarks. The first game we'll take a look at is Diablo 3 at 1080p. For the settings used, I'll link a picture here. You can pause the video for a better look. For the results, I played through the level Westmarch Heights to the end. Test Diablo 3 using a GTX 1060 saw an average FPS of 134 and a 1% low of 93 FPS. Diablo 3 played smoothly and would benefit from a high refresh rate monitor using a GTX 1060. Going back over our results from the 1050 Ti, we saw an average FPS of 128 with a 1% low of 85. I think the GTX 1060 is being CPU limited in Diablo 3 at the settings used, and I'd expect much larger gains moving from a GTX 1050 Ti to a 1060. I'd suggest increasing settings to offset this. Looking back over our results for the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics, we saw an average FPS of 58 with a 1% low of 44 using 16 gigs of RAM. As stated in previous videos, the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics are more than capable of handling Diablo 3 at 1080p. If you're looking to add a dedicated GPU for playing Diablo 3, then I'd suggest going with a GTX 1050 Ti unless you want to max out the graphics. The next game we'll take a look at is Doom at 1080p. For the settings used, I'll post pictures of them here. You can pause the video to go over them. For the benchmarks, I played through the first level of the game called the UAC. For the results, Doom saw an average FPS of 125 with a 1% low of 91. The game played very smoothly at the settings used and would benefit from a high refresh rate monitor or increase in visual settings. Going back over our GTX 1050 Ti results, we saw an average FPS of 78 with a 1% low of 60. I did not test Doom on the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics. Clearly, Doom plays well at the settings used on both GPUs. The 1060 has a lot of room for increasing the settings, though if you're upgrading on a budget and you're happy with 60 plus FPS at the settings used, then the 1050 Ti makes a fine choice for playing Doom. The next game we'll take a look at is Far Cry 5 at 1080p high presets. For the benchmark, I started at Joseph Conservatory and used Autodrive to go to Lamb of God Church. Looking over our results, we saw an average FPS of 82 with a 1% low of 54. The game played smoothly and looked good at the settings used. Moving up to a 1060 allowed us to increase from medium to high settings over the 1050 Ti. Going back over the 1050 Ti numbers, we saw an average FPS of 59 with a 1% low of 54 at medium presets. Taking a look at our Ryzen 3 2200G integrated graphics results, we saw an average FPS of 39 with a 1% low of 30 at low presets, 16 by 900. Far Cry 5 clearly benefits from moving off the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics. Moving up from a 1050 Ti to a 1060 is also a massive improvement, allowing for not only higher settings, but higher FPS. If your goal is with this system is play Far Cry 5, then I would suggest going with at least a GTX 1060 level GPU. That leads us to GTA 5 at 1080p. For the settings used, I'll link pictures here. You can pause for a better look. For the benchmark, I drove around the map at night, following the same general path for all results. Looking at our GTX 1060 results, we saw an average FPS of 100 with a 1% low of 70. Playing at the settings used leaves room for increasing visual settings or using a high refresh rate monitor. Going back over our results from the 1050 Ti, we saw an average FPS of 72 with a 1% low of 56. Looking back at our Ryzen 3 integrated graphics results, we saw an average FPS of 68 with a 1% low of 52. It's worth remembering that these results were at normal settings. As mentioned in previous videos, GTA 5 plays well on the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics. The move into a dedicated GPU allows for increasing settings or taking advantage of a high refresh rate monitor. Next, we'll take a look at State of Decay 2 at 1080p high presets. It's important to note that State of Decay 2 does not play in true full screen and will limit your FPS to the monitor's refresh rate. For the benchmarks, I played through about 30 minutes of the game recording the results. Going over our GTX 1060 results, we saw an average FPS of 60 with a 1% low of 31 at high presets. Remember, the game is being FPS limited by Force VSync. Looking back over our GTX 1050 Ti results, we saw an average FPS of 60 with a 1% low of 31 at medium presets. Moving from the GTX 1050 Ti to a 1060 allowed for increasing visual settings while maintaining the same FPS range. Returning to the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics, we saw an average FPS of 32 with a 1% low of 23 at medium presets, 1080p. It's worth mentioning that State of Decay 2 ran at 60 FPS low presets 1080p on the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics. State of Decay 2 is another game that sees massive benefits moving up in GPU. Moving off the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics to a 1050 Ti allowed for 60 FPS at medium settings, and moving up to a 1060 allows for 60 FPS at high settings. Alright guys, that's the end of my videos focusing on the Ryzen 3 2200G and its GPU upgrade path. Overall, I've been happy with the performance of all the hardware benched while staying within their respective capabilities. As for which option I'd suggest, I'd have to say that depends. If you're playing less demanding games, then the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics hold up well. If moving to more demanding games, then GTX 1060 is a clear winner and is worth the premium. However, the GTX 1050 Ti is no slouch and makes for a fine budget option for upgrading from the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics, as long as you're paying around MSRP. So guys, which option would you go with? Would you stick to the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics, or would you move to a dedicated GPU? Would you go with something like the 1050 Ti or something more powerful such as the 1060? What's your reason for choosing that option? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Well guys, that's it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and consider subscribing for more videos like this. Other than that, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching guys.